You're listening to Industry Talks on Design in Focus, a new multimedia channel serving CID. CID, Creative, Innovation and Design. Listen to representatives, practitioners and leaders on topics like industry development, skills, methods, movements, tools, concepts, projects, events, and much more. Hi Trine, and welcome to Design in Focus. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today, and I'm looking forward to talking with you. To start with, can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hi Candice, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. So my name is Trine. I work as an independent UX and innovation consultant, where I basically help companies innovate with care and also to build responsible digital products. So I've been a UX designer since the beginning of the 2000s, so for about 20 years.
Did you go straight into UX or did you evolve into it?
So I more or less started in UX, but it wasn't really called UX at the time. So when I graduated I took a multimedia designer education, which is basically an education where you're trained to do front-end development, UI design, but we also had usability studies. No one called it UX 20 years ago. So I started working as a front-end developer and UI designer, and I was at a newspaper. I helped all the ad consultants sell websites to the ad clients from the newspaper, and I also was part of redesigning the newspaper's own website to really modernize it and bring it into sort of a more modern state. And I've always been most interested in the whole UX perspective, the research, the usability, creating valuable products that solve problems for people. So I guess since the beginning of my career, it's always been the UX that's been most interesting to me.
I also started by studying multimedia, and a favorite method that we employed to develop effective design solutions was the double diamond method. Design research, such as audience demographics, including behavior, has always been an integral step in my design process. User experience seems to be like a natural comfort area for multimedia designers. Would you agree?
I think definitely the interest in UX started when I was a student of multimedia, because part of the course was a communication class. And in that communication class, we had lots of usability training, basically. Usability essentials, heuristic evaluation, think aloud protocol, testing. And it just resonated with me to figure out what issues and needs people actually have related to the product that we're building. So it was something that definitely was sparked at a very early stage in my professional development, for sure.
We both started by studying multimedia. I went into corporate identity, and it's quite a broad field. So finding a single area to zone into has always been quite a challenge for me. How did you come to specialize in ethical design? And what was your journey like entering this very unique field where not only you specialize, but you've managed to create an entire global network around it?
Yeah. So back in 2020, I co-wrote the book called Ethical Design Handbook. And that was basically the sort of the manifestation of years of work in ethical design, but also just transitioning from this more sort of usual usability and UX into something that has a deeper foundation in ethics. I started working with this really started when I started working with user experience for children, digital experiences for kids, because that made me realize just how problematic that whole space is, and how much just the sheer lack of ethical consideration and concern was evident in that industry. So that's really what sparked my sort of my passion for ethical design and accelerated that towards writing the book in 2020.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about what ethical design encompasses?
Yes, for sure. Broadly speaking, the definition of ethics is the duty and responsibility to treat others with fairness and respect. And we extended that for ethical design to define it as growing businesses and products and services from a principle of fairness and fundamental respect towards everyone involved. And what that encompasses is a focus on not just the product, but also on the business, because we actually believe that, it would be a lot easier for designers to do ethical design if the business also does ethical design or works from ethical design principles, right? So it's a matter of focusing on product, but also on business and on everyone involved in the processes, not just the end customers, but also the team and the people who actually build.
Yeah, the entire collective.
Yeah, exactly. And also the process that we use to design. So it's something that sort of encompasses everything that it takes to build digital services or products.
And that's quite important, right? I mean, if you look around you right now, how much of what you see has not been designed?
Yeah, I mean, at least designed with care, right? Designed with consideration, because I think that's really where a lot of the poorly designed products that end up, from an ethical design standpoint, that end up out there is a result of lack of care, lack of understanding, lack of empathy, and lack of ambition. Yeah. Because, to me, I think it's lack of ambition to create products that serve a larger purpose than just a monetary one.
Yeah, sort of like compensating stakeholders to facilitate them behaving in ways that serve business before people. In the 70s, this strategy started and more companies employed it. So what they would do is they would offer their management and directors sort of incentives as like, here's some stocks in the company. Prior to that, people would be more on the side of their employees, and then this sort of persona developed in pop culture of the big bad businessman, sort of like making it appealing and hardcore. Would you say that you've found that as well?
For sure. From a human perspective, I guess it makes sense that once you start having personal interest in a company, there could be a tendency to focus or to be sort of guided more towards your own personal interests versus the interests of the employees. I don't know whether that's a dominant mechanism in today's, in the way that companies run today. What I think has happened is that the amount of venture capital that's come from Silicon Valley, for instance, is at such a volume that for sure has incentivized certain people to make decisions that are not of the greater good of their employees or their customers, but to the greater good of themselves, for sure. Yes.
Yeah, and at the same time, even people who are maybe more developed morally, they're fed information in such a way that they sort of have blinders on and they don't see past problems because it's been conceptualized in a normal way, in a measure of success type of way.
Yeah, I mean, if all we focus on is KPIs, it's very easy to forget that there are actually people involved, not just, that there are people involved on both sides of a product. There are people who build this, who manage this, who operate these products and services that we create. And there are people who receive and use and misuse or are misused by the same products. But it's very easy to more or less intentionally put blinders on if all you focus on is a goal, as a metric that's monetary. And I think that's actually one of the mistakes that a lot of companies make, is that they just don't measure on employee happiness or on to an extent that's sufficient on customer satisfaction or customer happiness. Because satisfaction and happiness are actually two different things, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think, I've read quite a few studies which indicate that happier employees perform better. So, from my perspective, it is quite important to consider everybody, all your stakeholders with equal sort of, balance between them. Who would you say stands to profit the most from applying ethical design principles and, methods to their organization or business?
So obviously, I'm a big advocate for ethical design. It goes without saying. And I think there is potential benefit to be made across the board. What we're seeing currently and have seen for a number of years, but it's accelerating, is the fact that it is in consumer behavior reports, consumer behavior studies, where it becomes more and more apparent that people will turn their backs to companies if their values don't align. And that's, so that could definitely be a motivator for businesses to start looking into, okay, so how do we actually get our values to align with the people who we would like to have as customers? But I also think, there's much, it goes way beyond the monetary benefit, right? Yeah. Because it also means that, there are lots of metrics that are overseen in this. For instance, you mentioned that happy employees perform better, and that's absolutely true. That's been proven in some significant studies. But happy employees also stay longer. And with the world today, with the shortage of manpower and people basically jumping ship every couple of years, if you can improve your metric on getting people to stay longer because they actually find it valuable to work in your company, that alone is a huge financial benefit, because it costs so much money to keep having to train new people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The retention cost is way lower than acquisition. The budgets are massive difference.
Yeah, and you know what? That retention is much cheaper than having to acquire new staff. Yeah. The same goes for customers. Yeah. Yeah. Right? It's the exact same thing. Yeah. It's much more expensive to acquire new customers than it is to retain the ones that you have, and that also speaks to ethical design. Yeah. Because that actually makes people stay because they find your product or your service valuable. Yeah.
Would you say that because employees are gaining value and sort of feel like there's personal gain, on various levels, do you feel like they become more brand ambassadors and spread the message of your company through their engagement?
So, that could be the case. I think the reason why I'm hesitant to say yes is that I'm also seeing a tendency towards, people wanting to and taking the sort of the liberty of keeping their own social profiles, for instance, as their own. I am me. I'm not, I'm not employee X, right? So that's a tendency that sort of, steers people kind of a little bit away from that. On the other hand, what I also see and what I've, and this is also very sort of common human behavior, things that we are proud of, we want to speak about, right? If we're proud of something, we want to share that. I contributed here. This is what I was part of. And if you're proud of the company, the decisions that the company you work for, that they're making, you would obviously you would want to talk about that because it makes you feel proud that you're part of that. Yeah.
What would be a good starting place for an individual or organization to, start from if they were to consider implementing ethical design in their organizational structure?
It's not really important where, it's just important to start. I want to say first that it's also important to understand that ethical design doesn't require us to adopt or learn lots of new tools. We already have the tool set at hand, but it's a matter of using it differently, right? It's a matter of applying more critical decision making. It's a matter of understanding what types of KPIs would make sense from an ethical design standpoint. So we know how to set KPIs, we know how to track them, we know how to, but it's a matter of setting different KPIs. So ethical design is not more work, it's different work.
Yeah. Do you have an example of where traditional business tools are used to facilitate ethical design?
Actually, in the ethical design handbook, we created a set of scorecards. We call it the ethical design scorecard, which is basically a tool that you can apply to assess the ethical level in products, but also on the business level and practice level. And what it represents is 8 scorecards with different statements that you use to assess the current state of things, basically. And what's really good about moving the discussion, or the internal or external discussion, from a subjective point of view to an objective point of view, is that it makes it a lot easier for us to evaluate and score these things. So that's actually a really good place to start. And that's what I always encourage people to do, is if you don't have a project that you feel would be, that you have control over, that you would be able to apply, for instance, ethical design KPIs to, and sort of let that guide the project and see how that goes. It's not a new invention. It's a tool that's been used in business for a number of years to assess, to assess business things, right? But we applied it to, data collection, UX design, communication, these types of things, which is new, which is unusual, which is not normally something that you score. But the whole sort of setup of a scorecard is that you have these statements that you then assess based on on a scale from 1 to 5, and then they each have a weight, and that gives you a score. And that whole methodology, again, it's a tool that we already had in the toolbox, but we applied it in a different way, assessing whatever you have control over based on these scorecards. Is a really good place to start, because it gives you a place to start the discussion, and it gives you a good sense of what's going well and where there's room for improvement. Ethical design is not just something for the management level. It's something that you can apply regardless of what level you're on, but in different ways, right? So as a newcomer into an organization, or on a sort of an entry level, at least the least thing you can do is ask some critical questions whenever a situation arises, right? But if you're on a leadership level, that is really an opportunity to look at your governance model, and governance is also it's not a new phenomenon, right? It's something that's that's part of running a company and getting the operations to run smoothly. But applying ethical principles to your governance model is a great opportunity for someone in a leadership position to do, to start steering teams in a direction where where ethical design is more sort of outspoken, and just giving that sort of responsibility to a specific person on the team to have autonomy and all these things.
And I guess it's also, like, to an extent, quite useful for trust building, which I would say is quite a valuable quality for a leader to have.
Absolutely. And just leading by example, and making sure that the principles that our business runs on are sound and transparent and things like that is something that definitely entices trust. And that would extend to the product ultimately. So that's a very sort of valuable tool for someone in a leadership role. For people in product roles, applying principles around trustworthy design instead of deceptive design is also something that really speaks to ethical design and makes you improve on that ethical design score that we're talking about. So if you want to move into ethical design and work more with ethical design, there are some different things that you definitely could do. A good first step, I think, is to join the Ethical Design Network on Slack. You can join through ethicaldesignnetwork.com, which is our website. It's a growing community of people who are interested in ethical design. And there are lots of good resources and debates going on there that help people self-educate and connect over ethical design. If you want to sort of go a step deeper, you could buy the Ethical Design Handbook, which contains all of the different sort of core principles and practical methods to understand and apply ethical design. And for those who really want to dive way deeper into it, who might work in a company or run a team where you think that it makes sense to train in a team or as a corporation. I'm also running corporate courses in ethical design. They are tailored towards sort of more closed corporate circles where the focus is really on improving that within the company.
It's really great that there are so many ways to get involved, that you can start with very little effort. You, on the other hand, are investing quite a lot of effort into this.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that work that I do in various different platforms and places will inspire people to, again, first off, gain more awareness of this and to understand how much value, not just from a human, but also from a business perspective, that ethical design actually represents, because that's sort of the way forward into creating a slightly better digital space than what we're currently in and what we're leaving behind.
Well, you've most certainly inspired me, and you've also given me a more extensive comprehension of ethical design. Why should companies or organizations consider implementing ethical design?
Honestly, I think there are tons of businesses out there who, from a financial perspective, have really successful businesses. Even if they run their business on completely irresponsible, unethical principles.
Yeah.
And I acknowledge that. But the answer that I give to people who say, why should we do it? Actually, I think it's a competitive advantage. It's a competitive opportunity. It's an opportunity to stand out as something unique, something that is more value driven. And I think it's just an opportunity to do that. But it is also something that it has to be something that you want to do, because you see the value of it. And then I always also say it's not the opposite as running a financially thriving business. You can do both at the same time. It's completely doable, and there are tons of examples out there about that. I'm
interested in exploring some of these examples, and I think we should do so in our session tomorrow when we go a little bit more extensively into ethical design. What do you think?
Yes.
Do you have any closing remarks or comments?
What I would say is that I encourage people who are unsure as to what is ethical design, why should we focus on this? Is this a good idea? And also people who are just, value driven by heart to self-educate on ethical design. It's still not something that is, well, I think it's still kind of a niche, but we are a growing community, and there is absolutely growing attention also with the sustainability goals and all sorts of things that just speak to the diversity, inclusion discussion and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Self-education is the first step, right? Creating awareness, raising your own awareness on this, and challenging yourself on what's going on in this sector, in this sphere is hugely important. And then just start asking the questions in the companies. Why are we making these decisions? Who does it benefit? What are the long and short-term consequences? Are we potentially doing harm with the decisions we're making? I think is a good place to start.
Thank you very much, Trine. There's a big event coming up this August at which you'll be speaking. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, I'm doing a talk at the UX Nordic conference in Aarhus in Denmark about ethical design and the values of ethical design. And it's very excited about it. It's going to be a really cool conference with lots of different, very interesting speakers, not just about ethical design, but also about other very interesting UX topics. But I'm very excited about that.
All right. So anybody wanting to learn more, please visit the UX Nordic website at
uxnordic.com.
Thank you very much, Tina.
Thank you so much.